Hi, Mike. Hi, Mac.
Hey,
Hello.
How's everyone doing? Guys, tired of sleeping on the floor, trying to get into Hall H,
Yeah,
some
things
hotel
are
room
starting
in a
to
different
smell
county
here.
or anything else.
I'm
Um,
used to being the guy in the chair at home, so this is all
Yeah.
normal for me.
Yeah.
Hey, do
It's
you know
weird.
anybody who can grab me some Hasbro exclusives?
I feel so worn out, and I don't know why. And I'm like, is it just because I feel like I should be because it's Comic-Con? But in any case, we kind of in between. Coming up at 3, you can watch because it's at home. But Mac will be covering the Hellstrom panel for Hulu based on a Marvel. But they don't seem to be promoting it as a Marvel show anymore, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But
Yeah, that is a little weird.
But so we're going to talk a little bit about what the one panel that happened after our chat yesterday, and then the ones we saw so far today. So why don't we start with yesterday, Mac? You did this one.
Yeah, the Marvel HQ. I mean, it wasn't so much a panel. It was really just sort of like a bunch of their normal programming. So you had a Marvel draw. They showed you how to draw Venom. There was sort of a time lapse of a Lego build of the Spider-Mech Venom set. So it was fun. It wasn't anything, no breaking news coming out of the Marvel HQ panel.
No, yeah, I think that's the one thing that there's been some exceptions, but I feel like there's not a lot of breaking news. Maybe because it's all been pre-recorded. I know from our people that like a lot of times the stuff that comes out of Comic-Con like comes out like a couple days before, like they try like up to the hour sometimes, just because that's how fast things move, and then if otherwise it would leak out. And so it's weird because sometimes you're in a panel and like they'll announce a comic book thing today, like this morning, but they don't mention it at all. Or like yesterday, Mike, they put out all that sort of new characters in the High Republic, but they didn't talk about it. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So first, at 11 o'clock was our first panels. Now Friday is typically known as like the unofficial Star Wars day at Comic-Con, but so Mike's day started with Star Wars audiobooks.
It was only the Dr. Aphra audiobook was pretty much all they talked about, and I feel like this week was just like
keeping the tradition of poorly named panels.
I feel like this week is Dr. Aphra week because I listened to the audiobook. I interviewed author Sarah Kuhn, who I really got to learn to say her name correctly. And
Judy?
Say it again.
Any relation to Judy Kuhn?
I don't know who that is. And so
poor Disney fan.
Sorry. I am so sorry. Was she a bounty hunter in the Star Wars universe? No. What was I saying?
I don't know. I just apparently with Judy Kuhn.
Okay. Yeah, it's just and then there was a Star Wars Dr. Aphra comic book that came out, a new issue number 2 from volume 2 came out this week. So I read and reviewed that. And then now they had this 45-minute panel. Sarah Kuhn said a lot of the stuff that she said during the interview that I had with her that I haven't put up anywhere yet, but that'll be up, I think, sometime next week.
So you prepared her for her panel. Like you gave her the
This panel was recorded earlier than I recorded my interview with her because she referenced this panel in our interview. So yeah, my timeline is all screwy, but it was fine. They just talked about, they had additional people. They had some of the cast members, Lady Emily Wu Zeller, who plays Dr. Aphra, and then Mark Thompson, who does a lot of Star Wars audiobooks, and he played some of the characters like Darth Vader in this audiobook. And they just talked about the process of writing and recording this audiobook. And the audiobook is pretty good. So it was an entertaining panel, but it wasn't a tremendous amount of new information.
But so this is an original audiobook. So basically it's, normally when we think of audiobooks, we think of like books read, but this is almost, what's the difference between this and like a radio drama?
It is more like a radio drama, like the Star Wars Count Dooku Jedi Lost one that came out last year, which I really enjoyed as well. But calling it original is a little misleading because the bulk of this story is lifted almost directly off the pages of the Star Wars Darth Vader and the Vader Down and the main Star Wars comic titles that came out like 5 years ago. So they're basically they're going back and recapping what happened or how Dr. Aphra was introduced into the Star Wars universe via these comic books. Although this is now told from the perspective, so you've got this overarching narration by Dr. Aphra herself, kind of retelling these events, and then we do hear the voices of the other characters, and then there's new like interludes invented where we flash back to Dr. Aphra's time in her university years and a relationship that she has with another character to kind of set up something that pays off later on in this story.
Cool. So after that, you went to a panel about books where you read with Star Wars. So I know, like, typically at these Star Wars Comic-Con panels, these publishing panels, it's like everything, right? It's like from kids' books to comic books to novels, and it just kind of gives you the breadth of their publishing program. So what was this one like?
This was like that. They went through everything coming out soon. I can go through. I'm actually putting together the post, not as we speak, but in between times that we're speaking. But they talked about Star Wars, A Jedi You Will Be, which is a kid's book about Luke's time training on Dagobah with Yoda. They talked about the Darth Vader comic book series with author Greg Pak. They talked about Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back from a Certain Point of View, which is an anthology collection of a bunch of short stories kind of set in and around the events of The Empire Strikes Back. They did this a few years ago with the original Star Wars film. And then they did the Clone Wars Stories of Light and Dark, which is another short story collection kind of adapting stories that were in the animated series. And then I think there's a couple of new ones in there as well. There was Star Wars Poe Dameron Freefall, which I actually have in my house and need to read and review by the time it comes out, I think in like a week and a half. And then they talked about the Star Wars Dr. Aphra comic series with author Alyssa Wong, writer Alyssa Wong for the comic series, who's working on that these days. And then Timothy Zahn was there, probably the most famous Star Wars author as far as the novels go, and he's got a new Thrawn book coming out called Star Wars Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising, a long title, but that's coming out soon. And then let's see, George Mann was there to talk about Star Wars Dark Legends, which is another short story collection, but these are like fables. So the first book in this series came out last year, and that was called Star Wars Myths and Fables, and it's like myths and fables as they would appear in the Star Wars universe, like stories you would tell children if they lived in Star Wars. And this is the second volume of that, and these are going to be a little darker as the second chapter tends to be a little darker.
I have a question about that book. Yeah. Is that like in universe, or is it written like I would go like be a child inside the Star Wars universe, like if I was just hanging out on Batuu or something, I'm just picking a planet I know, and or is it like more like written for someone on Earth reading stories about Star Wars? Am I making sense?
Yes, it is. I would say it is written for someone to read in universe, but the cover and such has like Star Wars on it, so it's not presented that way in universe, but I bet somebody in universe would read these stories and it would make sense to them in universe. But there is an in-universe version of the first book, Myths and Fables, coming out to be sold in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. So you could buy it and it would have a cover that would fit into the Star Wars universe. And that's got 6 brand new stories in it. There's one about Batuu, there's one about Endor, one about Dathomir, and one about Mon Cala. That's 5. I don't know where the 6th, or that's 4. So I don't know what the other 2 are, but there's 6 brand new stories that he wrote for this new edition that's going to be exclusive to Disney parks. So that's pretty exciting. I don't know if that had been revealed before. I think I had heard a rumor about that or something. But yeah, they talked about that. And then they also talked about
that sounds like you should Google something after we're done here and see if we should write about it.
Well, yeah, I am writing about it. I interrupted writing about it to do this live chat. So, definitely hadn't gotten to that point yet. But,
yeah, no worries.
They talked about the High Republic, the cross-platform initiative coming from Lucasfilm Publishing, and Justina Ireland, the author, was there to talk about her book, A Test of Courage, which I think is the kind of the kids' book in the High Republic series. And they talked about the character of Avon Starros, who is the great ancestor of Sana Starros, who's a character that was recently introduced to Star Wars via the comic books and stuff. We also got info on the Lightsaber Collection, which is a book that details all the lightsabers from throughout Star Wars franchise and their owners, and it just has nice pictures and diagrams of those. They just kind of mentioned other comics coming soon, like the main Star Wars comic titles coming back. Bounty Hunters by Ethan Sachs is being continued. The relaunch of Star Wars Adventures at IDW. And the two announcements at the end were the Star Wars Shadow of Vader's Castle one shot from IDW, continuing that series. And then the big announcement that I already wrote up for the laughingplace.com website is the Star Wars The Art of Galaxy's Edge coffee table book by Amy Ratcliffe with a foreword by Walt Disney Imagineer Scott Trowbridge. And it's going to collect all the concept art for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which I'm super excited to get my hands on that.
That's really cool. So there's a lot. Do you have one book, I guess one might be obvious, but that you're super excited about that they talked about?
Well, if I had to pick one, the Galaxy's Edge coffee table book will be great to have. Looking forward to that. But as far as novels go, the Thrawn book is always the highlight of each year recently. Reading that one.
It's interesting that they, if you asked me 6 months ago, I would have said, wow, they're just going to spend 10 hours talking about High Republic. And now, even with that removed, it's amazing how much publishing effort they have going on, even when their biggest initiative is pushed back. So there's a lot of Star Wars.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, and it is crazy that on top of all this stuff coming out, there would have been the High Republic in a month, which is nuts. So it's kind of a relief for me to not have to absorb all that right now. But yeah, it's going to be early next year.
So from a galaxy far, far away to the mighty Marvel universe. That's not right. So they did the Marvel's Next Big Thing panel, which is really the main comic book panel. With typically at Comic-Con, there'd be an X-Men panel, there'd be a Meet the Editor panel, there'd be 5 of these, but they're really only doing one, what I would say main Marvel comic panel at Comic-Con at home. And you covered it, Max. So what happened?
Yeah, there wasn't nearly as much information as there was in the Star Wars panels, it seems. But it was still pretty cool. They went through some of the upcoming comics, most of which we already knew were coming, especially thanks to the latest Marvel's pull list that we just saw earlier this week. But we did open up with Al Ewing and Dan Slott talking about Empire, the ongoing crossover right now, which was a little bit strange because we are 2 issues into Empire right now. But yeah, so they kind of just went into what they're excited about. Al Ewing, I believe it was, mentioned the end of the 4th issue having a big twist. So I'm now very excited to get to that. They also talked a little bit about some of the tie-in issues like Immortal She-Hulk and Fantastic Four Fallout, which Dan Slott specifically mentioned that having a huge ramification throughout the Marvel universe. So also excited for that as well. After Empire, we moved on to Ten of Swords, which is the big X-Men crossover coming up pretty soon. Ben, you and I talk about this often during Marvel time. how the X-Men is not necessarily our favorite corner of the Marvel Universe, but I am now getting very excited for Ten of Swords. They kind of hooked me on this, and they didn't give a whole bunch of new information, but they did release a look at one of the covers for a Marauders tie-in featuring Storm, who is going to be a huge part of Ten of Swords, which you would expect from a big X-Men story. So, and the art, all the art that they've been showing off for that series looks awesome too. So I'm definitely excited to get into that one. And then next up was the Amazing Spider-Man number 850, issue 850 coming up, which marks the return of the Green Goblin, which I can't count how many times Green Goblin has returned at this point, but still very excited to see Norman Osborn come back. Again, not a whole bunch of new information. This, was announced a little while back. So we did get a look at the cover for it and some more of the art as well. And then the final comic they talked about was Werewolf by Night returning. They did mention that the villain of it was, they quote, the epitome of technology. So it's kind of this nature versus technology kind of battle. So it was cool to get an idea of what the story of this new comic will be. So a lot of new comics coming out, but again, not a whole bunch of new information from this panel.
Yeah, I gotta say I was a little bit disappointed. Not, I don't blame them at all, but I just was kind of hoping there'd be something new to get excited about. And I understand basically they paused, so anything that's coming out in the next couple months, they've already announced before,
Right.
And usually it's like, a month or two out, they'll talk about, what's happening. So, just having nothing to get more excited about. I mean, yeah, obviously we're in the midst of Empire, with the Ten of Swords coming, the X-Men universe is taken care of. With the return of the Sin Eater and Norman Osborn, like we kind of knew that stuff was coming, so it wasn't there wasn't a big reveal, but basically you got the whole Marvel universe is engaged in something crazy right now. So it's like I don't know what I wanted them to announce. I don't like, because you can't announce the next big Avengers Fantastic Four event because we're in the middle of one.
Right.
What's going on with X-Men because you got Ten of Swords. You can't announce what's going on with Spider-Man because he's just they just did the Prelude issue last week. So, it's not their fault, but coming from a Comic-Con where there was always just like random teases, it was just a little disappointing. Right.
The panel maybe should have been called Marvel's Current Big Thing.
Right. Yeah. It's like, in case you didn't buy in case you forgot comic shops were open last week, like here's what's going on. So, yeah, but that's kind of all that sort of frustrations offset by just I'm really enjoying reading Marvel comics right now.
Yeah, definitely.
Empire is really good. And then, we didn't get a chance to talk to you, Mike, about this week's Dr. Aphra comic. How was this issue? I know you wrote a review, but
yeah, I actually thought this most recent issue was great. The first issue of this current run I thought was fine. Like they really like setting up all the new characters, putting all the pieces in place. But now they this new team got to the place where they were going, and it immediately became very interesting to me because it's like this abandoned, lost city. It's very eerie. There were actually moments that really creeped me out in this comic book, which doesn't happen that often. I'm pretty difficult to scare, I think. And I was like, wow, that's creepy. And yeah, love when Star Wars gets weird, which I think that's one of the great things about Dr. Aphra as a character, that she's like an archaeologist in the Star Wars universe. So she gets to explore the weird history of the Star Wars universe. And that really comes across in this issue, and it kind of taps into the Indiana Jones inspiration.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's almost like if George Lucas created an archaeological character that finds artifacts that have some sort of mystical property.
Well, they've made no secrets about the Indiana Jones influence on Dr. Aphra. In some of the early issues, which I revisited because of the audiobook, there are direct references to Indiana Jones. Like, she has lines that are like inverses of things that Indiana Jones has said in the movies and stuff. So yeah, there's no secret that they're pulling from that.
It's funny, Ben, you mentioned that Spider-Man prelude. I just read that last night, Sins Rising. And Mike, yeah, it was very similar. It was very creepy. Actually, reading it at like midnight last night, it was a little weird.
Yeah, it's we talked about that. Well, I don't want to get too far into it, but it's like they set us up with a nice, cute issue of Amazing Spider-Man to then get us like into really creepy Spider-Man.
Yeah,
in a good way, not in like a, I don't know, like it's not like a Tales of the Crypt kind of comic, but it's
right.
So you had one more panel, Mac, the Make Mine Marvel panel, which is about making Marvel projects that are making Marvel accessible to younger readers. So
yeah, essentially they just kind of went through a slate of basically children's books that they have coming out, although they are very based in Marvel history, which I found kind of interesting. For example, the Marvel mini books collectible box set that they're releasing is based on these very old, tiny comics. And when I say tiny, I mean they were literally books the size of a penny that they, people would buy out of gumball machines and stuff like that. And so they're making a box set, books the size that you can actually read, which looks pretty cool. So that may not be the best stories. I believe it was Mark Evanier on the panel talked about how they couldn't be very good stories. I mean, they were literally the size of a penny. How were you going to fit too much of a story in there? But it seems like a very cool collectible item to have, on the shelf if you're a big Marvel collector. They also talked a little bit about My Mighty Marvel First Books, which is like a series of kids' books. We knew that the first couple were going to be based on Spider-Man and Captain America. They also told us that the next three would be Black Widow, Black Panther, and the Incredible Hulk. Again, not a whole lot of new information. One of the things that I was most excited about from this panel is the Marvel Value Stamps book, of visual history of the Marvel stamps, which they shared some quick looks at some old Marvel stamps, which was really cool. So that was another one, like I said, like with the mini book collectible box set, another really cool piece of Marvel history to put on your shelf.
Did they talk about this book at all?
I can't tell what that is. Is
Marvel
that
Classic sticker book?
Yes, yeah, they did talk about the sticker book as well. And yeah, showed you a look at some classic Marvel stickers, which, like the stamps, it was really cool. Like looking back at this Marvel history. So yeah, another great collectible piece there.
Yeah, we got a review of this book coming up in just a few days. So there's more coming. Before I do want to just bring up some things that kind of broke as we were talking. Not necessarily all Comic-Con related, but I think it's cool enough that we should talk about it, at least mention it. The Walt Disney Family Museum on August 6th is going to be doing a special fundraising event called Up Close and Personal with Alan Menken. And it's going to feature a special opportunity to engage with Alan Menken in an intimate way. But then following that event, there's going to be a complimentary performance with Alan Menken and a special guest, Lin-Manuel, I believe it's pronounced Miranda, will be joining him, his co-worker on the new Little Mermaid film coming to Disney movies, Disney Plus, Disney.com, something. So that's happening. And then Disney Parks announced that tomorrow they're going to be celebrating Christmas in July across their activities. So while we're celebrating the big day of Comic-Con, Disney Parks will also be celebrating Christmas. So yay, jingle bells. So coming up for the rest of the day, I just want to mention, so at 3 o'clock we have Hellstrom. Mac, you're covering that. At 4 o'clock, Mike, you're covering Bob's Burgers, and Mac is covering Crossing Swords. And at 5 o'clock, we got Archer. So there's still more coming today. We'll talk about that tomorrow after a big day. We've got a lot to talk about tomorrow. Also at 6 p.m., Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Jeremiah will be going live with SeaWorld with their new Ignite the Night fireworks show. So got a lot going on.
I also want to mention that there were a couple comments from John Bishop, who's another Star Wars journalist who will be a guest on my Star Wars podcast, Who's the Boss, coming up. We haven't solidified the date, but probably within the next few weeks, John will be on Who's the Boss.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We've got a whole lot more coming in the next day. Tomorrow is going to be a long show because we got the rest of today to talk about, and all day tomorrow, because we're not going to be coming to you until 6:30 tomorrow night, leading into Disney Trivia Live. So we got an hour. We don't have any more time than that, so we're going to have to cram it all in. But there's a lot of fun, including Antlers from Fox Searchlight, the Guillermo del Toro film, Phineas and Ferb, the movie Candace Against the Universe, The Right Stuff, as well as some other things like American Dad and Family Guy. So join us tomorrow. And until then, I got one more comment. Let me just see. John's looking forward to it. Mr. Bishop is, and we look forward to hearing it. It's great to. I feel like I get to know all of Mike's friends from listening to his comment. So thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.